My name's Wesley Littlefield with YourBassGuy.com, and I'm going to give you the 5 best bass fishing lures for any water. Number 1 is a crankbait. Now, crankbaits are probably my absolute favorite lure to use, just because you really don't have to do a whole lot. The primary thing is maintaining contact with the bottom or with structure. And other than that, I mean, the lure does all the work. Now, when I'm talking crankbait, you could be thinking any number of things. I've got a shallow running crankbait, you can tell, short little bill. Deep running crankbaits, flat-sided or even lipless crankbaits. And there's any variation in between all of these too. But they're simple to use and they're really great for beginners because they don't require like a difficult technique to master like some of the others might. Now, where to use them? Use them in rocky situations is the number one place to use a crankbait. Have treble hooks, so when you tend to use them around other structure, they tend to get snagged. They're terrible in grass because all they do is just catch the grass and pull along and you'll never get a bite. So primarily in the open or like a gravel bottom or rocky bottom, and if you're brave enough you can even use them around laydowns and other forms of structure, but primarily they're killer on rocks, and the key to a crankbait is bouncing it off of stuff. Number 2, that's a topwater. Now, just like a crankbait, there are 100 different versions of a topwater. I've just got 3 here. There's a buzzbait, popper styles, and one of my favorites to catch fish on as well is a frog. Now, frogs can be popper style. You can also have plastic frogs as a trailer on your buzzbait. There's any number of ways to mix these up. Super popular topwater is a whopper plopper, but they're fished all different ways. And depending on the situation, that's when you might use a buzzbait versus a frog. So frogs I'm going to use when the fish aren't chasing nearly as much. Now if they're just chasing anything, I'm going to burn a buzzbait down the bank. Whereas if they're not chasing as much, I might use like a Poppin Frog to really draw them from a long ways. Or if I need something a little more subtle, I'll use just a regular frog here, and it creates enough action on the water and mimics a bait, a frog, that fish will bite, bass in particular. And same with a popper. They're great for, you know, like a Poppin Frog, drawing those fish from a long ways because it's a loud sound and it just looks like a dying bait or an injured fish, and bass will eat it up. Where to fish a topwater? You're not going to want to fish it deep. You're going to want to fish it along the bank. I've called fish up out of deeper water, but I'm going to tend to stick like 8 foot or less. It works, you know, most topwaters are going to be great for cover. Now, a popper like this with treble hooks is not going to be good in grass, but a frog is killer in like lily pads or grass, and so topwaters can be used in both situations. I wouldn't throw this into a laydown, but I would easily throw this into a laydown because it's less snag resistant, and so it's gonna really depend on what exact lure you're using for a topwater, but they're probably one of the most fun bites because you just see the fish explode on the lure. There's really no bad place to fish a topwater as long as you're within about 8 foot deep, and judging on specifically what lure you're using. Number 3, and I feel like I've said this about all of these so far, but it really is another one of my favorites to throw, and that's a spinnerbait. Of course, like every other lure, there are so many different styles. You've got different style blades. Even on this one alone, there's 2 different style blades, different color blades, different skirt colors, different weights, and then you can go and put trailers on the spinnerbait itself. So there are all kinds of different ways to fish it, all kinds of different colors, and that's why spinnerbaits get the job done, because you can adapt to your conditions, and that's why they catch fish all over the country. Now, the best place to fish a spinnerbait is going to be like laydowns. I love throwing a spinnerbait up into laydowns. They're not great in like real fine, clingy grass, because the blades will catch and then they won't work, or the grass will get caught on the wire and it won't, it won't look good, won't look natural. But if it's not clingy grass like lily pads or something, then they're really good to burn it along the edge of a lily pad, or even throw up into the lily pad and bring it through. Reeds, down along reeds are really great. And then of course rocks, especially if you're bouncing it off of rocks, or like when you encounter a laydown, pulling it up over that laydown, letting it drop. There's not many bad places to fish a spinnerbait, and that's why it catches fish just about anywhere. The fourth way to catch bass just about anywhere is a jig. And a jig is one of those that it's a really simple lure and you wouldn't think it, but it catches mondos. I mean, giant fish are always caught on a jig. And I think it is because of the simplicity. There's nothing flashy about it. It's just cast it out there, let it set, bounce it off the bottom, reel it back a little bit. Big ones seem to find it. Now, there are so many different kinds of jigs. You've got football headed jigs, you've got swim jigs, you've got finesse jigs, vibrating jigs, or bladed jigs. There's all kinds of different varieties of jig out there, and there's all kinds of different colors. There's different ways to rig it. You've got your soft plastics, everybody has their favorite, and sometimes they have rattles like this one. Sometimes they don't have rattles. It all just depends on what the bass are feeling and what you want to purchase, what you want to throw. So where to throw a jig? Really, there is no bad place to throw a jig. Jigs are great because they've got a good weed guard, so they're going to keep most of the grasses off. You throw this in the thickest, nastiest stuff, and you're going to get it back more than likely, unless you just get really unlucky and set it hard into a lay down or something like that and lose it. But more than likely, you're going to get hit just about anywhere on a jig. And the fifth and final best lure, best bait to use is kind of me cheating in a way, because it's just soft plastics in general. I couldn't lower it down to just one soft plastic, and if I had to, I'd go with a worm, just because it's really versatile. But soft plastics in general. There's worms, you've got creature baits like salamander looking worm, or lizards, and then you've got creature baits that are imitating a crawfish or just some kind of funky looking bug. You've got Ned rigs, which don't really look like anything, but fish eat them. I mean, it looks like a worm, I guess, a really short fat worm, but they really don't do anything. My point is, there's all kinds of different colors, styles, and that's why they get the job done all over the country. Now, where to fish it, it's really going to depend on the way that you rig it. So there's 100 different ways to rig soft plastics. All of them work in specific situations, so it's hard to narrow it down to one. The one that I use the most is a Texas rig, and it's great for pretty much any situation because you can cast it into grass and it comes through grass really well. Cast it up into a laydown and it's less likely to get wrapped around the tree or a tree branch. You know, along rocks, you can drag it on the bottom along rocks. Primarily shallow water. You know, we're not going to go with a real heavy weight on a Texas rig, so it's primarily shallow water. Now, if you're going deeper, I would say a Carolina rig would be your better bet, and you can put a heavier weight on the Carolina rig, and that Carolina rig will keep the soft plastic a little more natural looking. But there's also like the Tokyo rig. There's also one of my favorite rigs actually is the Wacky rig, and there's so many others. I'm not going to say here and name them all. But soft plastics are the fifth and final lure that will catch fish all over the country. If this video helped you guys, we ask that you like and subscribe. And also, we have links to all the gear down in the description below. If you use them, we get a small commission at no extra cost to you. And don't forget that education is important, but fishing is essential.